Time now is 15 minutes away from 8.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Ads with Simon Pound from simonpound.com.
Let's talk about the advertising industry. What's going on this week in ads? G'day there, Simon.
Ads. I'm good, thank you. What's going on? All kinds of things going on this week. We had a busy show last night on the ad show. We record it on the Wednesday and it plays out on the Thursday night. Three kind of ad-related topics were bouncing around. I went and spent a very interesting day in Wellington earlier in the week. They are pretty good advertisers. They're very strong advertisers, Wellington. Everyone will remember the absolutely positively Wellington identity that they came up with. That's now 20 years old.
Is that? Gosh,
which is
really?
Quite remarkable, isn't it? 20 years old. Since then, they've had some strong campaigns like the Spoil Yourself campaign, and also a campaign where the idea was that you go and have a love affair with Wellington. And they had those great ads where it looked like there was a man and a woman having some kind of illicit relationship, but really they were just having a romantic weekend away, and they were already married. Quite sweet ads. But recently, they've decided that the focus of their advertising should shift away from New Zealand, where they've done a lot, and it's been quite successful for them. And they've now decided to try to focus on Australian visitors as the next low-hanging fruit, or other such expressions that people love to use in advertising.
Much like Melbourne sort of focuses on New Zealand when they do those ad campaigns for Melbourne and Queensland, a similar sort of campaign?
Very much so, and also in that idea of when a Kiwi goes to Australia, they don't say, hey, I'm off to Australia, because most of the advertising around New Zealand, because for bang for our buck, Tourism New Zealand's focused on that 100% pure idea. So the advertising internationally is for New Zealand as a country. But I mean, we don't go to Australia, we go to Sydney, or we go to Melbourne, or we go to the Gold Coast.
Yes, true.
And that's kind of how we travel. And so Wellington has tried to do that with that kind of regional idea. And they've partnered, Wellington City, the Wellington tourism people, have partnered with a whole bunch of adjacent regions. So Wairarapa, Marlborough, also Taranaki, interestingly enough, Taranaki. So they've partnered with, they are able to say to Australia, come over to Wellington, and not only will you get the cultural experiences of the city, but you also are only an inter-islander ferry ride away from the beautiful Marlborough Sounds and the wine region there. And you're only a quick drive away from Martinborough and the wine region there, the Wairarapa. So it's quite a cool idea. And the way that they are selling this idea to the Aussies is that at the moment they've made quite beautiful stop-motion animation advertisement.
Right.
And so they got this guy called Bernie Rue, who lives in Auckland and is a world expert on stop-frame animation. And he's directed it, and it's quite magical. They've made it out of fabric. So the idea is that it's like a patchwork, all of the experiences that you can have down there. And so they've actually animated this patchwork advertisement. Now, we're not meant to see it in New Zealand, not that they don't want us to, but they're not spending any of their money on it. They're spending about 1.5 million on media spend, so getting the ad out there in Australia, and they've spent about $500,000 on the whole creative concepting and creation of the advert. And
would the money have come from the various tourism organisations in those regions all pooling it together?
Absolutely. So Hutt City, Wairarapa, Marlborough, Wellington, and Taranaki. And it does look quite funny on the ad. You're like, Taranaki? Like, of course it's back to Wellington. Yeah. But I guess in Australia, like, that is close. That's a country where you're able to drive 5 days left or 5 days right, while Taranaki is only a couple of hours.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's a stone's throw compared to going from to Broken Hill to absolutely. That's really interesting. So no doubt though that there'll probably be a website, I'd imagine, that people, if they wanted to take a look at that ad, they probably can once it's up and running.
Absolutely. Like if you Positively Wellington is the name of the Wellington tourism organisation. They will have links to all that. It's playing for the first time this Sunday night in Australia.
Yeah.
And we did a show on it last night, so we did a story on it last night, so that will be up on the website after it plays tonight as well on the Ad Show website.
Well,
I thought it was a really cool campaign. It's really quite beautiful, and I found it interesting for the reason that they'd worked out that pulling together, they were able to provide a much better kind of proposition to people. Because I don't know about you, but when I think of Wellington, I often think of a small city, kind of maybe windy and raining. But then if you add to it the beauty of kind of Martinborough and Marlborough, it really does make it a much nicer region.
Wellington certainly does it better than Auckland or even Christchurch, really, at organising itself to market itself around the country and obviously now across the ditch as well.
Yeah, very good.
Rhys Darby, he's been appearing over the past year or so in many ads, and now he's in another campaign.
Yeah, he's doing fantastically, isn't he? He's in a campaign now for HP, Hewlett-Packard, who are trying to get the information out there that they're not just a printer-making company and not just a this and not just a that they're actually this enormous tech company that does all of these different things. And so they have engaged the services of Rhys Darby, and he goes through and acts as a bit of a clueless dude from New Zealand, which isn't a stretch for his shtick over the last little while.
Yeah.
And he goes and talks to people like Dr. Dre is probably the most amazing one, and Andy Leibovitz, and a guy from UPS, and a guy from the Venetian Casino. And just kind of bowls up and is like, oh, wow, you're using HP technology in all these interesting ways, and is just a little bit kind of funny. So it's more of the same from Rhys Darby, but then again, America's a big country, so if he's been on Flight of the Conchords, he'd probably be a little bit known, and then all the ads he's been on here, he hasn't been on in America, obviously, so there's still a lot of room for him to be doing well.
He's certainly not going to risk overexposure over there anyway, at least.
Not over there,
No.
like having been in Yes Man and stuff. I mean, I think we had someone on the show last night say because we pay attention to everything that he does, we could get overexposed.
Yeah.
But over there, he's the world's oyster. But it's really quite amazing that it's just awesome how well he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, finally, Simon, a tip-top ad that's found itself in a bit of spot of bother.
Yes. Yeah, well, one thing to wrap that up, if you want to see those ads, they're very funny, and they're at Let's Do Amazing is the thing to search for them under. One is a tip-top advertisement for a yogurt that had, an ice cream that had yogurt blended into it, and the idea is that is going to be healthy. They had an advertisement that people may have seen that had a young girl, maybe about 3 or 4, sitting at a Formica table, talking about how she doesn't like broccoli, she doesn't like asparagus, but she does like ice cream, and so she's happy to eat this. It was a pretty innocent kind of ad. It started out by saying, hey kids, and then to talk about how these other foods were yucky, and so at least there'd always be ice cream to eat effectively.
Yeah.
And 7 people complained about it to the Advertising Standards Authority along the lines of it was putting down healthy food, it's difficult enough to get kids to eat good food as is, and it was irresponsible and bad. And the ASA, quite interestingly, upheld the ad. They upheld the complaints. They have said that it was unacceptable.
Wow. That's quite a step, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. It's quite remarkable. Like, Tip Top came back and said this was meant to be aimed at adults, and it was meant to be light, and it was meant to be silly, and it's rah. And they did a couple of things to make sure that it would only be for adults. Tip Top say, and that they showed it after 6 o'clock at night, and it was targeted at this, that, and the other. But obviously some kids are still around at 6 o'clock, so it's not fail-safe. And it did say, hey kids, at the start, so they had a bit of trouble convincing anyone that. But it's quite an interesting new precedent, really.
It is, because I wonder if it'll start the ball rolling. People chomping into burgers and whatnot. Will that still be acceptable into the future?
Well, the problem seems to be that they were putting down vegetables as a food source, and that is now not acceptable. And I don't know, I don't know. That just seems like an unusual thing to me for the ASA to be making a ruling on.
And it'd be interesting to find out.
I can understand cut and dried problems to do with kids,
but where they
get or moral bad values or something. But making a kind of light-hearted thing about how kids don't like broccoli, I don't see that that's really the place.
Well, unless they have gauged that in society now there is such an emphasis on healthy eating that they can make a ruling like this because in wider society it's unacceptable.
It does seem unusual to me that we live in a world where you can't be mean to Brussels sprouts.